Okay, hi friends. So this is session 19, Advanced Backup Techniques. This session is basically understanding some threshold concept, understanding how to change that what should be done if a threshold comes or we are nearing, approaching to the threshold limit or related to cache or related to memory. Okay, so Sybase does not provide this stored procedure. Actually, what we have to do is we have to write our own stored procedure for this purpose. So even if I'm saying this SP underscore threshold action, there is no such stored procedure, and you have to write it ourselves. The SP underscore the threshold action, the name is suggested because we want to take some action on some threshold. So you must be created by the database owner in a user database or system administrator in Sybase system procedures or a user with create option, create procedure permission. Why I am talking about this is, my friends, because this procedure is a little crucial procedure, and it will actually keep track of dynamic parameters, the parameters which are changed dynamically, or the variables. So it is not doing anything else as such. It is just taking the parameters and checking the values of those parameters, and based on that is taking action. So basic guidelines can be given, but then you can enhance this stored procedure, and you can add values to this stored procedure. You can add threshold and create threshold procedure for any segment in a database. So in short, we will be monitoring the segments and memories and caches and all this variable things where we feel that there is a problem, there might be problem because of that. So then we should contain some dump transaction command to truncate the transaction log. So SP threshold action should contain a dump transaction command, because when we are approaching that limit of the memory or that cache or that segment, then we should dump the transaction log. So therefore we should consider this threshold option and add check the variable and the values and dump the transaction. So we should write our own stored procedure for this purpose. By design, the last chance threshold allows enough free space to record a dump transaction command. So this is the design that you can issue a dump transaction command even if the threshold is approaching. So there will be enough space at least for this particular command. Only commands that are not recorded in the transaction logs, such as select, fast BCP, read text and write text, and the command that might be necessary to free additional log space like dump transaction, dump database and alter database can be executed. Okay, in this by default other commands are suspended and a message is sent to the error log. To abort these commands rather than suspend, you can use abort. So basically we are going to write, and this is example of call. This is how we can call this procedure. So when a threshold is crossed, adaptive server passes the following parameters to the threshold procedure by position. This is expected that you should write. By Sybase is not providing this. Okay, SP underscore threshold action, DB name, segment name, space left, status. So these are the parameters, these are the variables. DB name is the name of the database where the threshold was reached. Segment name is the name of the segment where the threshold was reached. And space left is threshold size in logical pages. And status is 1 for last chance threshold and 0 for all other thresholds. So if it is 1, then we should take the appropriate action, because this is last chance threshold. And this is how we can write this. Create a threshold procedure for last chance threshold that dumps the transaction log into a tape drive or tape device. So create procedure SP threshold action. So as I said, we are creating this. DB name varchar 30, segment name varchar 30, space left integer and status integer. So if we are creating this procedure, keeping in mind that we are working on last chance threshold, that means the value is 1. So as this is the simple syntax. Dump transaction at db name, though whatever the database name to provided, to tape dump 1 to the device name, logical device name, whatever you have created. So this is a simple stored procedure to dump the transaction on reaching the threshold or taking actions. Working waking suspended processes. Once the dump transaction command frees sufficient log space, suspended processes are automatically awakened and complete. If fast BCP, write text or select into have resulted into unlogged changes to the database since the last backup, the last chance threshold procedure cannot execute a dump transaction command. When this occurs, use dump database to make a copy of the database and then use dump transaction to truncate the transaction log. If this does not free enough space to awaken the suspended processes, it may be necessary to increase the size of the transaction log. So therefore, you must increase the size of the transaction log, because if you don't have enough space, you have to increase the size. There is no other option. Use the log on option of the alter database command to allocate additional log space for this purpose. System administrator can also use sp_who stored procedure to determine which processes are suspended, and then you can use a kill command to kill those processes. Loading a transaction log to a point in time. So if we want to recover a database point in time based on the logs, based on the transaction logs, you can use this until_time option of load transaction. You can recover a database up to a specified point in time in its transaction log. To do so, we can use until_time option of the load transaction. To use until_time effectively after the data has been destroyed, you must know the exact time and error that occurred. Because you very well know that when we talk about a point in time, we have that basic knowledge, basic understanding where my transaction might have stopped or might have crashed. So that point in time should be aware. We should be aware of that, and therefore to recover that database from the transaction log, we can supply that timestamp. You can find this by issuing a select get date at the time of the error. So when that error comes, if you can select, you can use this statement select get date. Okay, for example, suppose a user has accidentally dropped an important table, and a few minutes later you get the current time in milliseconds. So you can use select convert character 26 get date 109. So this is will give you a timestamp. So in other words, you should know at what time, till what time you want to restore your database, restore the image using the logs and the point in time. So you have to specify the timestamp. Loading the transaction log to a point in time continued. After dumping the transaction log containing the error and loading the most recent database dump, load the transaction logs that were created after the database was last dumped. Then load the transaction log containing that error by using until time. So here is the most important point, most crucial point. Then you can load that transaction where the error is also lying, you know that. So if you know where the error might have occurred, so and if you want to specify time, okay, so you can specify, for example, 10 minutes before that time. So you can specify in this time, in this example, about 10 minutes earlier. So load transaction employee_db from this device with until_time, and this is time. So based on the time which was given in the last slide, look at the last slide, it is 12:35:59, and here it was 12:45. So if this is our time, and we know that around 10 minutes back something has happened, and we want to recover the timestamp, so it is 12:45:59, and we are issuing the command at this time and so we want to recover the time 12:35. So we are giving 10 minutes before the scheduled time or the time which we have checked. So this is the timestamp which we are providing until time. So it is there is no way that we can find out that at what time our system crashed or what was the time. So we have to keep monitoring, and we may have some trigger and that threshold action stored procedure which can be used to get this timestamp or to uh, have an idea where we can up to where our transactions in our database is intact or consistent. Loading a transaction log to a point in time. After you loaded a transaction log using until underscore time, adaptive server restart the database log sequence. This means that until you dumped the database again, you cannot load subsequent transaction logs after the load transaction using until time. So which means that you have to dump the database again, so you will not be able to use subsequent transaction logs because you already done so once. You must dump the database before you can dump another transaction log. So here the point is clear that if you use a load transaction using until time, then you will not be able to load it again using the same statement. Okay, so because it will restart the database log sequence. So that is the point. So let's go through once more. After you load a transaction log using this until underscore time, adaptive server restart the database log sequence. This means that until you dump the database again, you will not be able to load subsequent transaction logs after this. That is the point. Bringing the database online. After you have applied all transaction log dump to Sybase database, you can use online database to make it available for use. For example, to bring the database MyDB database online, you can use online database MyDB after you have applied this. Loading the database dump from older versions. If you have database dump which was taken on old version or earlier version of Sybase, okay, so then you can do so, and there is a provision for that. During most upgrades, all databases associated with the server are automatically upgraded. So you don't have to do much as such. As a result, database and transaction log dumps created with an earlier version of Adaptive Server Enterprise must be upgraded before they can be used with the current version of Adaptive Server. So Adaptive Server provides an automatic upgrade mechanism on a per database basis for upgrading database or transaction logs made with backup server to the current Adaptive Server version, thus making the dump compatible for use. However, these tasks cannot be supported by automatic upgrade functionality, like loading an older version of master database will not be done. Installing new or modified stored procedure cannot be done. Okay, so they will continue to use install master. So that is the problem. So there are few things which will not be upgraded. So still now to upgrade a user database or transaction log dump to the current version of Adaptive Server, what is the sequence? The sequence is use load a database and load transaction to load the dump to the upgraded Sybase Adaptive Server Enterprise. Okay, now Adaptive Server will determine from the dump header which version it is loading, because when you dump it will store the information of the version and all the details. Like I'm sure you might have seen the MySQL dump also, SQL Server dump also. The first few lines talks about the version and which is used at the time of dump. After the dump header is read, and before backup server begins to load, the database is marked offline. So before it is actually loaded up, before backup server begins the load, the database is marked as offline by load database or load transaction. This will make the database unavailable for general users. So it provides the user greater control over the load sequence and eliminate the possibility that other user will accidentally interrupt a load sequence. So this is advantage. So while it is being uploaded, it will not be available for use. Then you can use online database after the dump is successfully loaded to activate the upgrade process. After the upgrade process is successfully completed, adaptive server places the database online and database is ready for the use. And after the successful execution of the online database, use dump database. The database must be dumped before the dump transaction is permitted. This we have been talking about again and again on this. That's how you can upgrade old version database to a current version. And to check the status, we have a status bit. The database offline status bit is there. Okay, the database offline status bit indicates that the database is not available for general use. It can be determined by using sp_help db. When the database is marked offline by load database, a status bit in the sys databases table is set and remains set until the successful completion of online database. So that means when you are actually doing this upgrade, when actually you are bringing it online, or when you are actually working on it, the status bit of the database in this sys databases will remain set. So to check that, the database offline status bit works in combination with any existing status bit. It augments the following status bit to provide additional control, and that is in recovery. The database offline status bits override these status bits like DBO reuse only or read only, and these status bits override the database online status bit, which is begin upgrade, bypass recovery, in load not recovered, and suspect or use not recovered. So these are the different status which may override this database offline. That means which may still work even if the database is offline. So these are status bit. Although the database is not available for general use, you can still use these commands when the database is offline. And the commands are dump database and dump transaction, load database and load transaction, alter database on device, drop database, online database, and dbcc diagnostics. So good thing is that even if the database is not available for people, available for users to work, we still have many commands which can be used to check the consistency of the database, for dropping the database or altering the database options, and dumping or dumping transactions. Still have a lot of commands which are available when the database is not available online. Cache binding and loading databases. If you dump a database and load it onto the server with a different cache binding, be aware of cache binding for a database and the object in the database. You may want to load the database onto a different server for tuning or development work, or you may need to load a database that you may dropped from a server whose cache binding have changed since you made the dump. So when you bring a database online after recovery or by using online database after a load, adaptive server verifies all cache bindings for the database and database objects. If a cache does not exist, then adaptive server writes a warning to the error log, and binding the sys attributes is marked as invalid. Therefore, by checking the error logs, you have an opportunity to create the cache and bind it to the database. If you can create a cache of the same name and restart adaptive server, the binding is marked as valid and the cache is used. So therefore, you have to have that understanding of error messages and logs so that you can check what went wrong. And if it is related to cache, you can create the cache with the same name and restart adaptive server, so it will still mark it as valid and start working. If you do not create a cache with the same name, you can bind object to another cache or allow it to use the default cache. If possible, recreate cache that have the same name on the destination server as the binding on the original server. If you are using destination database for decision support or for running dbcc command, you may want to configure pool to allow more space in 16K memory pools. So therefore, this is how you can bind the cache and check the cache and overcome the problems in the cache which is bound with the database. Binding information for database is stored in master sys attributes. No information about database binding is stored in the database itself. Please be careful about it. So if you want to understand what cache is bound with that particular database, you can find the details in sys attributes, which is under master database. If you use load database to load the dump over an existing database that is bound to a cache, and you do not drop the database before you issue the load command, this does not affect the binding. Okay, bind the database on destination server to a cache configured for needs on that server, or configure pools in the default cache on the destination server for needs on the application there, and do not bind the database to a named database cache or named data cache. Sorry. Okay. Building a new master device. If something has gone wrong and you need to build a master device, build a master device only if your old master device is damaged beyond repair. Otherwise, you can recreate the master and model databases on your existing devices, existing master device. So we may have some situations where our master device itself is corrupt and we want to build our master database again. Okay, there are two procedures for recreating the master database. One is replacement of the master device, and second is forcing the SAP ASE to recreate the configuration area. So in both ways you will be able to get a new master device again. Okay, replace the master device when the master database is corrupt. If the master device configuration is also corrupt, then you can force SAP ASE to recreate the configuration area. That means you can still have the option to get everything online, to have everything perfect in shape. So by creating the master device again, and even if the configuration area is also corrupt, you can force to recreate the configuration area as well. You can often detect corruption in the configuration area because the server does not run and produces error message starting the area is corrupt. So if you get this kind of message that the area is corrupt, you can still recreate the configuration area. Replacing the master device. You must restart a SAP ASE after replacing the master device. Build the master device or rebuild the master device with a data server -w option. The command is data server -w master. That's it. So this is very simple command, data server -w master. This will rebuild the master device. The -w option causes SAP ASE to search the device for database fragment belonging to the master database. After it finds these fragments, it will write a default master database into that space and then shut down. Then after this step is done, you restart SAP ASE and with the run_server name which you have, which is created. Rebuilding the configuration area. If the configuration area is corrupt, then you must use a data server -f option to force SAP ASE to reconstruct the configuration area. The prerequisites are the following restrictions are applicable. 1. You can specify the page size if it is wrong. For example, -z 8K. You can specify the device size if it is wrong. For example, B 125M. Any allocation unit on the disk that appears corrupt or that are not currently allocated are allocated to the master database. So the -w master option with or without -f recreate only the master database. All other allocation units on the disk remain unchanged, so you may be able to recover the data using disk refit. This is a very good command, disk refit. Building the configuration area. If the entire master device is corrupt, for example in case of disk failure, replace the entire device by starting SAP ASE using data server -z page size -b device size. If the existing master device is not on a raw partition and you plan to reuse it, remove the old master device. Start the server with data server -z page size -b device size. When determining how large to make your master device, keep in mind that this device reserves 8K for its configuration area. To use, for example, to use a full 96 MB for the device, You cannot specify simply 96 because then there's extra space is required. So what you should specify is -b 96.01. So this is mandatory because this 8 KB is required. So you have to specify that for configuration area which is to be reserved. So this is 96.01 MB. When you use this method to rebuild the master device, SAP ASE creates new default databases for master, model, temp DB and system Sybase system DB. So that is the advantage of building. If you are building master device, then it will create all these databases. No matter which method you use to restore your master device, all users and passwords in your master database will be gone. So the only remaining privileged login is SA with no password. So therefore you will be able to log in with SA and you have to create all the users. So this is a precaution, and this is the negative side of it is that all the databases, I mean all the users and everything will be gone. Now let's understand the command which I was talking about, disk refit. It rebuilds the master database sys users and sys devices system tables from information contained in sys devices. Adaptive server automatically shuts down after disk refit builds the system tables. So use disk refit after the init as a part of the procedure to restore the master device. Okay, so the command is disk refit. That's simple, straight away. Thank you so much for watching, and that's all for advanced options in recovery.